Greetings, my listener. Are you a gambling person? Have you ever tried your luck in your life? What do you personally like? Cards, slot machines, or maybe roulette? What do you say? People are greedy creatures by nature. Even those who have everything dream of more, especially them. Gambling knows no age, gender, or position. It pulsates somewhere deep inside, wakes up in everyone. As soon as you hear the ringing of coins or see the spinning wheel of fortune. Somewhere in a dusty alley of Atlantic City, one throws his last hundred into a slot machine. And in Las Vegas, another puts 100,000 on the table and burns up in a minute, like a cigarette butt. Someone loses the house, someone wins life. But there is a game that attracts in a special way. Roulette. It would seem that everything is simple. The wheel spins, you bet on a color, a number, a sector. The ball jumps, the heart stops. Then that's it. Victory or defeat. And that's the magic. Instant choice of fate. It all started with roulette. This is a story about fairly rich, influential, and wealthy people who decide to play the game, but whose lives will turn into a nightmare. Although none of them, five, knew yet what they were getting into. Arthur Sloane, a predator in pince-nez. He looked like he came out of an old portrait. A black suit from Brioni, a stern look from under glasses with a gold frame, gray hair, perfectly styled back. The owner of funds that own half of the skyscrapers in Manhattan, lived on the 97th floor where glass walls hid his loneliness. That evening he dined alone, as always. Lamb with rosemary, a glass of wine for $5,000. When the courier came up in the elevator and handed him a black envelope without a word, Arthur wasn't even surprised. The card was engraved in silver. The game is available to you. The entry fee is $2 million. Details will be provided later. The phone number is included. The access code is 6. He snapped his fingers, and the assistant instantly processed the transfer. The phone, like a deaf witness, was waiting on the marble table. He dialed 6. And for the first time in many years, he felt something, like excitement. Although no, for him it was a breath of life, something he hadn't experienced for quite a long time. The second player was Marcus Bell, a scientist with a shadow behind him. He ran a biotech empire, produced drugs that prolong youth, but he himself had long since ceased to believe in life or its meaning. He lived in a sterile mansion in Seattle, where even the air was purified by 8 filters. When a man in a medical gown entered his lab with a black envelope in his hands, no one understood who it was or how he got inside. He disappeared, leaving no fingerprints or traces. Marcus opened the invitation. There was the same inscription. No logos, no addresses, no name. He bowed his head, smiled, and said into the void, "Someone finally remembered me." Next was Jonathan Crane, a man of war. He was rough, dry, like the desert in which he spent half his life. An ex-intelligence agent who became the owner of a company that sold drones and weapons to governments of other countries. He lived in Nevada, alone, behind a high fence under cameras, among many dogs that replace communication with real people for him. Although, in fact, he did not need it. The envelope flew to him, on a drone. The device hovered by the window, released a black cylinder, and flew away. Jonathan was not surprised. He was intrigued. He put the phone in his pocket, looked at the sky, and whispered, "Finally, something interesting." His face showed a slight happiness. as if a little life had been breathed into it. The fourth was Brian Miller, the god of the internet. He was a star, the creator of the largest streaming platform, young, handsome, with the eyes of a man who has not been surprised by anything for a long time. He lived in Palo Alto, surrounded by screens and servers. An envelope appeared in his coffee cup. Literally. When he took a sip and felt a strange taste, he pulled out a folded card from inside. "You're a player. If you want more, dial 6. He laughed like a teenager. "This is the best marketing idea of the year," he said. The last player was Alexa Vero, a beauty queen who died from the inside. Everyone in the fashion world knew her name. Her collection sold for millions, but she had not felt anything for a long time, neither joy nor delight. She tried to stay as far away as possible and not to show herself to others, especially to representatives of the yellow press, who infuriated her and irritated her to the bone. On the terrace of her villa in Malibu, under the rustle of the waves, a boy of about 6 appeared with a box. He said nothing. He handed over the box and disappeared. The appearance of this child seriously scared her, but at the same time it intrigued her. Inside was a phone, a card, and the scent of roses. On the card there was an inscription, instructions. Like everyone else, with only one difference. "Your game begins, Queen." She did not ask anyone, and there was no one. She was surrounded only by loneliness. She, like everyone else, transferred the money, dialed 6 from the phone, and waited in anticipation for the game. On the appointed day and time, each of them was met by a Rolls-Royce. One by one, they sank into luxury. No one asked questions. The drivers did not speak. They drove for a long time to different private airfields, as if someone had thought out the logistics in advance down to the last turn. A Gulfstream 700 waited for each one alone. There was no crew on board. Only an automatic system, glasses of champagne, and screens displaying the inscription, "Welcome, relax." The flight went without a hitch. There was no turbulence, no announcements. Everything was like in a luxurious simulation. The seats massaged the back, the music played invisibly, and on the screen, one by one, the inscriptions went out. Arrival in 4 hours. 3, 2, 1. An island appeared below. It was as if it were carved out of a dream. Thickets, rocks, a beach, and in the middle of all this beauty stood a huge house, like a palace. They landed one after another. All around, silence. No security, no greeters, not a single person. The path from the runway to the mansion took about 10 minutes, on perfect asphalt paved with black stone. On the way, they managed to get to know each other better. Everyone kept their distance and were not particularly talkative. Some already knew each other by sight, although they had not crossed paths before. They came closer. The gates themselves opened, as if recognizing the guests. In front of the house there were many fountains, where instead of water, blue liquid with silver reflections flowed, like a blue lagoon. During the day, it seemed like a trick of the light, but everything was too perfect. The mansion stood on the top of a cliff, surrounded by forest, like a trap. Glass walls, black marble columns, parquet that didn't let footsteps pass. The light burned softly, as if it hadn't been turned on, but was streaming out of the air. They entered the central hall. In the middle of the hall was a huge round table. At first glance, it was a roulette table, the same one, red and black, numbers from 0 to 36. But inside the glass, something was moving, subtly, like breathing, and the air changed. It became thick, warm, like before a thunderstorm. From somewhere came the smell of jasmine and ash. On the table lay 5 black cases. Inside were chips. They were heavy, cold, with unfamiliar symbols instead of numbers. Above them an inscription flashed, as if it had come to life in the air. Dinner will be in an hour. The game will begin at sunset. And again, not a single person, not a single living step, only silence, and the feeling that someone was watching them. On the island, the clock struck 8 p.m. The door to the dining room opened silently, as if by itself, and a scene worthy of the rulers of empires appeared before them. A long black wood table, decorated with silver candlesticks and gold-edged dishes. On the table were exquisite dishes: salmon tartare, duck breast with fig sauce, truffle cream soup, baguettes with sea salt, oysters on ice, wines of the rarest varieties. Everything was perfect. Everything was served, but there was not a single waiter, not a sound, not a single step. "They have a real NFT restaurant here," Brian chuckled, taking a glass of Petrus, "without unnecessary people and fuss." "It's perfect," Marcus replied, sampling the appetizer. "Or," Alexa drawled, her gaze sliding over the very same silver lids on the dishes, "they just don't want us to know who's serving all this." They sat down. Dinner was leisurely, even pleasant. Everyone was in their own slight excitement, anticipation, in anticipation of something big, until Arthur looked at the mantel clock. 8:59 p.m. The mechanism of the varnished clock clicked. 3 dull strokes. The room shook slightly, as if the house had taken a deep breath. Again, without a word, the door to the hall opened. A soft light streamed from behind it. Something was already waiting inside the hall. "Well then," Jonathan said, adjusting his sleeves, "it's time." They headed to the central room. It was not just a room, it was the heart of the island. A capsule room, round like a giant's eye. The high ceiling was lost in the haze. The walls were covered in black velvet with gold patterns. The light fell from huge crystal chandeliers, but there was just enough of it to make everything seem unreal, like a luxurious dream. In the center was a roulette table, perfectly polished, massive, red and black. The numbers seemed to be drawn with blood and charcoal. Inside, under the glass, there was movement, slow, as if not a mechanism, but a living creature. Along the walls were armchairs, velvet, deep, and next to each one was a black box tied with a gold ribbon. They entered, one after another, and suddenly the door behind them slammed shut with a deafening click. The roar echoed around the circle like a gunshot. "A joke?" "What's going on here?" Arthur said less confidently. "Too serious for a show," Marcus muttered. And then they saw him, the croupier. He stepped out of the shadows, as if he had been there all along. He was almost 2 meters tall, dressed in black, not a tuxedo, but something resembling a robe. On his face was a mask of wrought iron, without holes for the eyes, with a white grin painted on it. His hands were in black gloves. He moved slowly, but with frightening grace, like an executioner accustomed to attention. He approached the table and spread his hands at his sides, as if calling for silence. The voice came not from his lips, but from the air, deep, hoarse, unnaturally calm. "Welcome, players. You have made your choice, and now you are here. You are the best of the best, the loneliest of the strong, the richest of the successful. You will forever be a part of this place. Before you is the game, a game of roulette. Only the rules will be as unique and unrepeatable as you are. Here the stakes are not money. The chips lying in the black boxes glowed with a dim light. "What is this?" Alexa whispered, touching the chip. It was warm, dense, as if not made of plastic. "Every bet is a choice. If the ball stops not on your sector, the chips will disappear, and you will get punished." The walls of the hall flashed. Scenes were reflected on them. A body losing a finger, a man pulling teeth, woman cuts off ear, all in slow motion, without sound, but scarier than a scream. Brian exhaled and shut up. His breathing quickened. The roulette wheel chooses the punishment. The object with which you will perform it will be on the chips that are in your hands and that you will bet. You can do the task yourself or trust others to do it. Refusal is impossible. Escape is impossible. There is no exit. There is only the path forward, or your game will end at that very second. Pause. The ball appeared in the center of the table, by itself. It emerged from a small hatch and began to slowly roll along the edge of the wheel, picking up speed. "I don't like this. Has it started already?" Jonathan asked, slowly retreating to the chair. "Should we place a bet?" Alexa said. Her face turned marble. "You bet," the voice said. "You choose, and you pay." The chips glowed brighter. They began to disappear. One by one. The spin intensified. The light in the hall began to flicker. There was a crash, and the ball froze. 32. A hatch in the table opened in front of the chair where Marcus was sitting. There was emptiness, darkness. But something rose up. On the velvet was a human ear. Next to it lay a blade, covered in rust. "The first bet has been made," said the voice. "The first gift has been accepted. Your choice, Marcus." Everyone was silent. Marcus stood up. His face instantly turned pale and lost its color. But his eyes did not twitch. "I should do this to myself. Are you kidding?" Panic began to take over his entire consciousness. "Yes," the voice answered. "Or your game will end right now." He took the blade and went to the mirror built into the wall. He exhaled and ran his hand over his ear. A scream burst out of him as an endless stream of pain and fear. Marcus, barely moving, took his place at the table. This was only the first game. The others looked at him and the table in shock and numbness. It became clear to everyone that this was no longer a joke and not just a game. The clock read 21:42. Marcus sat in a chair, pressing a napkin to the stump where his ear had recently been. Blood was running down his neck, staining the collar of his shirt and the thin skin. He was breathing heavily, but did not scream. He just looked at one point where the mirror stood, looked and was silent. And the others were silent. They sat, clutching the chips in their palms, and felt how cold sweat was running down their backs, how the blood in their veins was freezing, and fear did not allow them to take an extra breath. But the roulette did not wait. The croupier extended his hand, and the ball began to move again, click, click, click. The noise of the wheel filled the room again. The light became a little dimmer. The air was heavier. Even the luxury in this room began to seem sepulchral. "Maybe that's enough," Brian muttered, shaking. "This isn't fun anymore." "Nobody promised fun," Arthur said hoarsely, not taking his eyes off the wheel. It was as if he was trying to figure out, What's the logic in this? How to choose a safe bet? This is all madness, Alexa breathed out. This can't be real. It's all too real, Jonathan said. Too fucking real. The ball stopped. Black. 15 Brian's chips disappeared. A hatch opened right in front of him. The object of punishment rose up, a thin metal rod and a small vise. And next to it, his finger already separated from his body. Or an exact copy? No one knew. It lay there like a promise. Second gift accepted. Player, Brian. Task, removal of the little finger on the left hand. Tool, rod, vise. Time, 2 minutes. No, 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 he screamed, jumping up from his chair. Brian threw his chair back with his hand, rushed to the door, began to beat with his fists, then with his feet, then with his whole body, trying to break it down or at least move it. The door did not move. Only a dull pain gave off. He climbed onto the panel, tried to tear off the lamp, climbed up, looking for at least one exit. Brian, stop, Alexa screamed, rushing towards him. Calm down. This is a trap. If you do not fulfill it, automatic loss, violation of order. The player loses the right to execution. The sentence is activated. The floor beneath Brian creaked. Alexa ran back, covering her mouth with her hands and standing still. A black hole appeared like a trapdoor. He screamed with every cell in his body and tried to push away, but the floor sucked him in like a vacuum. One muffled scream, and that was it. In its place, only silence, and the smell of blood which spread through the room like fog. "Oh my God," Arthur whispered, losing his composure for the first time. "They're killing us," Alexa said. "This isn't a game. This is a massacre." "No," Marcus whispered. "This is a selection." And again the spin. Third round. No one spoke any more. No one tried to leave. Hopelessness and horror froze on their faces. They just watched fate spin. Red. 18. Chips. Alexa. In front of her, a clamp, thread, scissors. And so, a lock of her hair. And then a piece of skin from her forehead. A task appeared on the screen. The third gift. Remove the skin from the right half of the face, from the forehead to the jaw. Tool, scalpel. Independently. Time, 5 minutes. This is season madness. I can't. Then you will die, fool, Arthur said dully. Do it, or disappear forever. Or you, Alexa, was shaking. She took the scalpel. Her hands were shaking so much that the scalpel constantly slipped and fell to the floor. Gritting her teeth and gathering the last of her courage, she pulled the skin with a special clamp. One cut and a heart-rending scream filled the entire room. Blood spurted in all directions. But the woman's suffering was not over. She could not complete everything the first time, and she had to make a second cut, and then a third. Her wild scream shook everything around. Her vision swam, and she lost consciousness. Jonathan ran up, picked her up, and began to shout, "Someone! Call 911! She's dying!" He ran up to the dealer and began to shake him in the hope that he would help, but he stood motionless, as if he was not alive at all. "No help provided," said the voice. The player did not complete the action. Death from consequences activated. Alexa's mouth began to bleed. Her eyes opened for a moment, then her last breath, and deathly silence. The body sank limply to the floor. Blood spread across the marble, drawing deadly patterns. 2. Gone. 3 to go 21:58. Fourth bet. There were no words now. Even Arthur was silent. Marcus just sat there, staring into space. The dealer extended his hand, and the ball began to move again. Jonathan was clenching his teeth so hard that blood ran down his gums. Black. 10 chips. Jonathan. A huge hammer and a cleaver appeared in front of him. On the panel, his knee. Removing the kneecap. The tool in front of you. The method of performing the blow. Do it yourself or ask another player for help. Time, 3 minutes. He was silent. He took off his belt. He bit it hard with his teeth and raised the hammer. A sharp blow and a frantic scream. Bones crunched like small chips underfoot. Blood sprayed like a fountain in all directions. His body slowly slid down the chair, but the task was not finished. And with his last breath, he tried to swing the hammer again. Another blow. And loss of consciousness. The player has lost the ability to complete the action. Death from blood loss has been activated. And again a lifeless body on the floor. Blood and hellish silence. 22:06. Arthur and Marcus practically did not move. They did not speak. It seemed that even their hearts stopped beating from the horror of what was happening before their eyes. You know, Marcus finally squeezed out. Only now I understand that the most important thing in life is itself, and no money is important anymore. Yes, Arthur nodded. Now only one thing is important: to win in order to stay alive. Or death. They were looking at the roulette, and it was already spinning. 22:10. There were only 2 people left in the room. 2 ghosts of the former elite. 2 living corpses, in which the warmth was still smoldering. Arthur Sloane, with the burnt fatigue in his eyes, and Marcus Bell, who was wrung out by life like a rag. But he was still breathing. For now. The blood on the floor was drying, turning into black puddles. The bodies of the 3 dead had already been removed. Where, how, and by whom was unknown. Only the ominous shadows in the corners and the rusty smell of suffering suggested that all this was quite real. The silence did not ring. It pressed as if the air had become concrete. The light was growing dim, as if the lamps were also losing their strength. Meanwhile, the wheel continued to rotate, without an invitation, without a command, as if it itself was now deciding who should suffer. Arthur stood up. His movements were slow, almost ceremonial. He approached the table. He looked at the ball spinning in a circle, like a planet in hell. He knew the next round was the last. For one of them, it would be liberation. For another, a curse. The ball slowed down. Click. Red. 27. Chips. Marcus. Again. A panel opened behind him. The mechanism ejected a metal tray. On it, an automatic scalpel, ligaments, bandages, and a glass container. Inside, a human eye. Who's... It doesn't matter. It rolled from side to side as if it wanted to break free. The final gift. Remove eye. Time, 3 minutes. Execution independently or ask another player for help. The choice of tools is at your own discretion. Reward for victory. Freedom. Life. Money. Pause. Long. Brutal. Marcus laughed. Hoarsely, dully, as if he was bubbling with blood. He knew it was impossible, but he also knew there was no other way out. To run is death. To refuse is death. He glanced sideways at Arthur. Their eyes met. There was no malice, only understanding. He lay down on the table that came out of the wall, like the morgue wards for corpses. He tied his legs with belts, then his torso with belts on his waist, and took the scalpel. He drew the first line. The skin parted like wet cloth. The light reflected in the streams of blood flowing down. He was gasping for breath. His hands were shaking, but he continued. Blood was pouring over his face, hands, neck, and chest. "You can't," Arthur whispered and came up to him. Marcus, with shaking hands, handed the automatic scalpel to Arthur and said, "Help me, I beg you." Arthur stood next to him and continued what Marcus was unable to do. Crunch, crack, the screech of metal and throat. He inserted the connector and stuck his fingers inside. He squeezed the eye and abruptly tore it out. There were no tears or fear visible on Marcus's face. Scarlet streams of blood flooded everything around. The picture resembled a mess on the face, in which there was not a drop of life left. For a moment, victory and euphoria. They made it. They did it. But less than a minute passed before Marcus died. He won the round, but lost his life. The hand was still squeezing the eye. It pulsated in the palm as if in death throes. 2300. Arthur Sloane was left alone. He stood alone in the middle of a huge hall covered in someone else's blood. The dealer had disappeared, and the voice was silent. Arthur screamed, called, and tirelessly asked whether this was the end or not. But in response there was only deathly silence. The light went out, and he was left alone with himself. For a while he even switched off. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a voice said, "Your game is over." For the first time in a long time, music began to play. Quiet, waltz-like. On the ceiling, golden lamps lit up. The hall again looked festive. An entrance opened on the side. A wide door swung open, and behind it, a corridor was visible, at the end of which dawn was flickering, and the barely perceptible chirping of birds. On the table there was a suitcase, inside of which were cash in the amount of $10,000, documents for a private jet, a passport with a new name and a letter. "You have won. Welcome back to the world. Live, if you can." He did not smile. He did not cry. He simply picked up his suitcase and walked slowly, as if each step plunged him into viscous water. Arthur left the mansion and headed for the coast, where the plane was already waiting for him. He walked up the steps to the sound of the surf. He sat down in a chair and closed his eyes. But the silence inside him did not come. Brian's laughter rang in his ears. Alexa's scream. Jonathan's hammer scraping. Marcus's blade. He had survived, but he would remain with this forever. When the plane took off, Arthur wiped away a tear, for the first time in all this time. It was not from happiness or fear, but from an emptiness that no bank account, millions in a suitcase, or victory in a game could close. And the roulette remained spinning, on the island where silence froze again. Meanwhile, somewhere in Switzerland, high in the Alps, there was a building that was not listed in any registry. It was not on satellite maps, nor on papers, nor in digital archives. Only a few could get inside, the chosen ones, the masters of the world and destinies. Snow-white walls, chrome panels, guards in gray uniforms, and the meeting room. 7 people were sitting at the table. Their faces were in shadow, their eyes as if empty and devoid of any emotion. On the table were monitors that displayed frames from that very game. Brian's death, Alexa's despair, Jonathan's frantic screams, trying to cut off his knee. On the central screen, Arthur Sloane, sitting in his new mansion. He came back and stayed alive. But his condition can hardly be called life. He hardly eats or sleeps. Every night he sits on the balcony without turning on the light, drinks whiskey and stares into space. The reaction is stable, said one of the voices. The psyche is damaged but not destroyed. The trauma is deep. How long will he last? Maybe another week, a month. But it is not so important. The main thing is that he will not talk. He will become a legend of this game. Are you sure that he will not give away our trail? He does not have much choice. Either he remains silent or the end of the game will come to his house. Then one of the 7 sitting pressed the button. On the screen, the next card popped up. On it was the name and face of a woman of about 35, an investor from Singapore. The next cycle is ready. Where will the game be? On a new platform. We are building a stage in the Sahara. Candidates? 20 profiles appeared on another screen. All rich, single, psychologically predisposed people. Each of them had already received an invitation, and only one person was watching all this from the outside. And on the island, the croupier was already at the table, still the same, still in the same mask. He puts 5 new boxes on the table. Click after click, the empty wheel rotates. And behind the walls, somewhere in the distance, a helicopter is moving, with new guests, with new destinies, with new blood. The game is the game. It never ends, as long as there are those who want to test their fate, risk everything and put their lives on the line. And do you want to play? Or perhaps that's all for now. But do not forget that it depends only on you whether this story will get a second life. The one that gets the most likes and views will find its continuation with no less terrible and horrible development of events. It all depends only on you. Thank you for being with us.